Swamiji.
Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Krutau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaye Dakshinamurtaye Namah Om Namah Pranavaर्थाय Shuddha-jnanaika-murtaye Nirmalaya Prashantaye Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Tad Vijnanascha Shokatyaya Ityapi Darshayati. Can you put it back on the screen? Acharya is connecting the previous verse to this. He does it very often. Maybe a single word, a single line, connecting the verses. All this time, we've been saying that this is not easy to understand. It seems to have contradictory properties. He continues the same thinking, but now in this verse he says, despite the fact that it is Asino, Duram Bhajati, etc., it is also Anoraniya, Mahato Mahiyan, it is both knowledge and ignorance, it is both near and far, it is both big and small. At the same time, it is still knowable. So, tad vijnanascha shukatyaya ityapi darshayati. Once you know this, once you understand the nature of the Atma, the phala is very clear. The shokam is gone. Why does he say only shokam is gone? We said last time that it is not only shokam, that shokam and ananda are the same thing. They are not different. So if shokam goes, that also goes. That can be confusing because you say, what I want is to not have shokam, but to have anandam. That is the ultimate purpose of every human being. I want to have anandam in some form. Why human being? Every being. A cat, they say, would find the most comfortable space to sleep in. In the house, if you have a cat, it will find the most comfortable space to go and sleep in. Everybody seeks that situation which removes shokha, even though temporarily, but allows me to have ananda. They are both the same. I remember when we were children, and all children sometimes they go through this phase of huge laughter, running after each other, laughing away. My mother saying, don't get so high on joy. It will automatically mean you will also have the down. I didn't understand it at that time. But profound statement. If you have that joy, the other is, it's the other side, the flip side of the coin. It will happen. It is probably happened before, it will happen again. in that situation, why does he say that it'll get rid of shoka, rid of sorrow, grief? Because really what we want to get rid of is the sorrow. Alongside, if my happiness also goes, then what? Some people argue with, saying then what is left in life? Hey, there is no such thing as life. Who says there is a life? That what we call life is starting point, ending point of a Namarupa only. All experiences are mithya. What we are trying to do is to go deeper into understanding what is the reality. That reality which was, which is, which will be, and which is Trikalatitaha, and not dependent on time at all. Although I keep defining by saying it was, is, and will be, it is something which even time is not a boundary. To us, everything is bounded by time. This Atma that we're trying to understand, the I sense that I'm trying to understand, is not bound by time. That flip in understanding is what will probably get us there. Why does all Shastra tell us it is Guhyatamam? Most difficult to understand. Because the mind has to take that one step, that flip. So here, even in other places we've seen Brahmavid Tarate Shokam. They only talk about Shokam. That is what you want to get rid of. Then what will I be? What will be left? Will I be left with happiness? Not in the sense that you have no happiness in this Jagat. But the understanding of the self as the very Swarupa of the idea of Ananda. That whole range, starting from Ananda, extreme Ananda to one end and extreme Shokha the other end, all of them, that which sustains all of them, that which is the very adhisthana for all of them, that is my nature. Otherwise, my entire definition of I, by nature is I'm intelligent. By nature, I'm generally a happy person. My nature is I am well built. That's how we define. And what Shastra is trying to tell us is, please take a step back and relook at that. Relook at your definition of what that I and mine is. You are bigger than all of them. I have to perforce use words like bigger. But once you understand what this means, Mahat, you are not contained by any of these. You're not contained by a physical space or an object. You're not contained by time. You're not contained by Ananda or Anananda. You're not contained by knowledge or ignorance. If you look at it, if you understand this, then the statement which is made in many places in the Shastra becomes more clear. When it says, for example, that knowledge knowing which as though everything is known. You've heard that before. What does that mean? The entire range of what you call knowledge. One end, what we think of knowledge within the Jagat, through to the other end, where we think of as ignorance at the other end. All of them depend on I in this form of Gyadhaturtha. Similarly, you hear other statements which Shastra makes, which sometimes is not very easy to understand. Conceptually, if I can understand this much, I get to know that this whole dvandva cannot be I. I has to be transcending all this. Now use the word transcend. Where do I find a word now? It has to transcend time, it has to transcend space, it has to transcend vastu, it has to transcend ananda, it has to transcend knowledge, everything. That I. Once I understand that I, Shokam Tarati Atmavit. Atma is known, there is no space for Shokha because you understand that is a dreamlike state. This whole thing that we accept as real is like a dream state. Therefore, the phala that Shastra tells us is, why should I make all this effort? Life is like this. Life has highs and lows. Life has joy and sorrow. It is life. That is what the definition of life is. So I'm going to live life to the full. When I get joy, I'm going to be joyful. When I get sorrow, I'm going to be sorrowful. Good luck to you. But that is all unreal, really speaking. Unreal, really speaking. That will be there forever because that is all dependent on time. But when I re-examine myself and I recognize myself as not being contained by time, as everything as I know is, I wake up to the reality. Prarabdha samaye yap pratyabhignayate. I recognize the reality of I. Then there is no shoka, there is no moha, there is no nothing. Now you look at all those sentences in the Bhagavad Gita. Sthita prajna does not react to shoka and moha because this shoka, moha, dukkha, etc. belong to the Jagat. Sthita prajna recognizes that. They are upadhi based. So he doesn't react to them. Although he has a sharira because it's Sthita prajna who has to undergo whatever the sharira has to undergo. Sharira has to undergo what it has to undergo. The sthula sharira and the sukshma sharira. But the sthita prajna recognizes that and therefore is unaffected by them. By no dvandva is affected. Labha, labha, whatever. Only through recognition. So many places in the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavan says, don't get pulled by dukkha and sukha. Neither of them have any meaning. Neither has a meaning for you. But I am still here in the Jagat, in the Sharira. Really, if you look at it, take not one step but two steps back, everything is Atma. But I have to examine that which is my error point. My error point is my Sharira. That is what all this is examining. This verse examines that. Where is the error coming from and how can I correct the error? Once I correct the error, then I am in a position to recognize the the reality. I don't immediately recognize it. I still have to go through the process. But I'm now in a position to recognize the reality because I have now recognized what is unreal, where my error has been. So in this verse, tad vijnanacha shoka atteya ityapi darshayati. How you cross the shoka, the fact that you cross shoka is demonstrated. Asharigam sharireshu
Ashariram
Ashariragam
sharireshu
sharireshu
anavasteshu avasthitam
anavasteshu
anavasteshu
avasthitam
antam vibhumatmanam
mahantam
mahantam
vibhumatmanam
vibhumatmanam
atva dhiro na shochati
matva
matva
dhiro na
dhiro na
shochati.
shochati.
evam jnatva na shochati. In many places you will find this or equivalent phrase. Kim jnatva, that Atma which is asharira, doesn't have a sharira, no form. Yet I recognize so far I as in this form. Because ashariram sharireshu, in every sharira I recognize this. Because every sharira has a sukshma sharira. In every sharira I recognize life, the living principle. And that living principle I recognize because there is sukshma sharira. But what I fail to recognize is that which enlivens this sharira is the ashariram. What I fail to recognize in a shop full of gold ornaments, I only look at the surface, the shape, the size, the shine, the workmanship of gold ornaments. I forget to look at gold. I'm so caught up with that. You know who will recognize this? The bullion trader. The shopkeeper might sell you 10 grams of gold, but so beautifully made that he charges you another 10,000 rupees for that new thing. The same thing a bullion trader walks, when you want to forget a bullion, you want to give it back to that shop. You're not going to pay you for 10,000 rupees for that making. Because he recognized only the gold. When you bought it, you saw what was on the surface, the beauty of it, the meenakari, the workmanship, the filigree work, the beautiful work that has been done. And you're willing to pay for it because that's all you saw. In this Jagat, we saw the beauty of the Jagat. We see that everywhere. I see the beauty of my own body. I appreciate all that. Sometimes I don't. I feel seeing I'm short. But I am seeing the whole world and nothing but the world. I'm seeing everything. I'm seeing the variety. I'm seeing the beauty of it. I'm seeing the way it's been constructed and designed and created. But I don't go to the one more step and saying, how did this happen? So people come to Shastra and say, the Shastra tell me how it happened. The Shastra says, I can tell you how it happened. And gives you a beautiful model. In that model, the key thing to recognize is that all of this comes from one source called Ishvara. Therefore, everything is Ishvara. None of them really exist. Oh, that is the model. What happens from Ishvara? From that Ishvara comes Akasha, Vayu, iti. Then all go through a process of grossification, and then you have the entire Jagat of the world of gross products and the world of Sukshma products. Oh, it's like that. Yes. Therefore, I recognize something called Ishvara. I am now at least some amount of conviction saying that Shastra has something interesting to say. But the next step is, what is the Ishvara? And it says, it is like the pot maker and the clay rolled into one. Abhinna nimitta upadhana karanam of the entire Jagat. Oh, that Ishvara you're talking about. Yes. Jagat Karanam Ishvara. Having got that far, then I got hooked into Shastra, and Shastra, I have study of Shastra, saying, okay, there must be more. And the Shastra guides you by the hand, takes you and says, what do you want? I want a life with no shoka. Really? Hey, your life has no shoka. There is no life. The life that you are recognizing is in this Jagat, which is all like the pot. There is no other shoka. You only have to look one step beyond that. And you see Ishvara. And then you look at the Ishvara carefully, and you look at yourself carefully, and you do a lot of vichara. You arrive at the fact that Ishvara is nothing but that one vastu. I am also the same vastu. That is how Shastra takes us there. Explain the Jagat, address what every human being wants, every being wants. Other beings may not recognize it. Human being recognizes that I want to be free of shoka. Why is my life subject to shoka? And that takes us there. In the sharira, there is ashariram. You know, sometimes in the stories, I remember reading in the childhood saying ashariram. There was a voice without a body. The voice came from somewhere. That's other meaning people have for ashariram. Without sharira. This ashariram sarireshu. In the body that I recognize, that I've so far thought of as I, there is asharira. And what is the nature of this body and the nature of the asharira? Anavastheshu avasthitam. Listen, this sharira, the very meaning of the word sharira is shiryamana yatasti tada shariram. Shiryamana means that which will decay and destroy. Now, if you use the definition of sharira, everything in the world is sharira. Because they'll all be destroyed shortly. But here we are focusing on that sharira. In that sharira, which is anavasthitam, which does not have a stable state. Anavasthita means where that one state which remains unchanging is not there. It is subject to time. At time T1, it has a certain sharira, T2, it is different. Constantly the cells in the body are dying and new cells are developing. That is anavasthitam. In that anavasthitam shariram, there is a avasthita ashariram. That which is completely unchanging. It is not subject to time, it is not subject to place. If I go to New York, it remains the same. My body doesn't remain the same. I take a 12-hour flight to New York. My body is in a different shape. Even the mind is not in the same shape. Maybe a lot of expectations, maybe a lot of fear, maybe a lot of apprehensions, especially these days with our friend Trump in the White House. Going to America means there's a lot of apprehension. You never know when you'll be turned back and asked to go back. Mind is not the same, body is not the same. But there one unchanging, avasthitam ashariram, is that which livens his entire sharira. It also livens everything else in the jagat. But our current focus is not on them. Current focus is on us, on this sharira that we recognize as I. Ashariram sharireshu anavastheshu avasthitam. That which is mahantam and vibhum, atmanam, all Dvitiya. Ashariram sharireshu anavastheshu avasthitam. Another one next paradox that we've been following up in all of these things. In that anavastheshu avasthitam, that atma, atmanam, what kind of atma? Mahantam atmanam, vibhum atmanam. That atma which is mahantam means big. And Shankaracharya really takes it up a little. This atma, big, small is all relative. So Shankaracharya takes it up a little bit more in detail. Therefore, the word vibhum, sarvavyapi, sarvavyapinam. That atma, when I recognize, matva, dhiraha, dhira, the one who recognizes, who understands, who is jnani, he na shochati. So the phala is very clear. How do I get to that phala where I have nothing to do with any sorrow? Is what the whole study of this Upanishad is about. How do I understand in such a fashion that I am not subject to sorrow? I can study all kinds of things. All the colors, all the arts, all the sciences, all of them I can study and understand in great depth. But I'll still be subject to sorrow. Like Narada, great scholar, knew everything. But he went to Sanat Kumara and said, all this is fine, but why am I still sorrowful? Why am I still subject to sorrow? That will come only when this paradox is understood. This paradox is understood because I have nothing to do with this paradox, which is because of the rage that I'm talking about. One and the other end is the same. So, dhiraha anavastheshu sharireshu avasthitam ashariram mahantam vibhum nyatva matva na shochati. We will know this paradox is confused rationalists. You know what a rationalist is? There are several people who will reject all this straight out. It is not possible. How can something be anoraniyan, mahato mahiyan? It is not scientifically correct. So they will go with their lights and tubes and technology and say, how can you prove to me where is Atma? I will agree only when I can see it. Like somebody, I read a book once, fiction, pure fiction, but he was trying to set up an experiment because he had come up with a scale which could measure really, really minute weight of an atom, etc. You could find out. So he was trying to, collect bodies which are on the point of dying and kept weighing them till the body died and said, can I find a difference? Imagination. But rationalists get confused because it's full of these things, like Zen. In fact, Zen borrows it all from here. We've seen all this thing already. Ashariram, Sharireshu. How can you say that there can be Asharira? How can you say Shayano Yati Sarvatra? If sleeping is sleeping in one place, how can you say it going everywhere? So all these instruments and this thing doesn't explain this. But our Shastra is full of that. Asharirisham Sharireshu, you remember Kshetrajnaha. What does it say? Idam Shariram Kaunteya Kshetramat Shariram Kaunteya
Kshetramityabhidhiyate.
This Sharia is called Kshetram. And that who knows the Kshetram is Kshetrajnam. But the second line is even more interesting in this context. Kshetrajnam chapi mam vidhi sarva kshetreshu bharata. That Kshetrajna, Ashariram, sarva kshetreshu bharata. Is there in every kshetra. These paradoxes in Bhagavad Gita you see many places. You've seen, no, in when he says, let me check, you can immediately find that. Yanisha sarvabhutanam tasyam jagarti sanyami. Yasyam jagrati bhutani yanisha pasyato munihi. Where that which is nisha, night for everybody, is light for jnani, and the other way around, vice versa also. Like that, there are many, many of them. If you remember, 9th chapter also, there is one, no, which stands out in the second or third verse of the 9th chapter. Masthani sarva bhutani. All beings are in me. And then he says, Nachamasthani bhutani. Same this thing, next verse. Contradicting himself. Or at least apparently contradicting himself. All this then, people who don't understand, only understand the surface, will argue. But if we understand what it is, why the apparent contradictions, when he says, I am the subject, I am the object, I am also the experience. When he says, I am small, I am big. When you say, I am near, I am far. Everything. Then things falls into place. Even then, it takes an effort to do some vichara. But without that, you will be another rationalist, never get there. So, our Bhashyakara explains all this. Can we look at the Bhashyam? Ashariraha
Ashariraha
Pena Rupena Akashakalpa Atma.
Kena Rupena
Vena Rupena
Akashakalpa
Akashakalpa Atma.
Akashakalpa Atma is what? That which is like Akasha. It is all pervading. Now, again, we have to take this example, the Drishtanta, from within the Jagat. And within the Jagat, the best example we have is that of space. You can't cut space, you can't cleave space, you can't do anything to space, you can't contain space. Space is in and space is out, everywhere. So, Asharariraha is Svena Rupena. In the same, it pervades everything. Akashavat. Akasha Kalpa Atma. That Ashariraha. Shariram na vidyate yasya. Which has no form, no shape, nothing to contain it. Any form means there's a containment. There is no containment. That Ashariram, tam ashariram, ashariram, tongue twister, tam ashariram,
Tam ashariram
sharireshu,
शरीरेषु
deva pitru manushyadi sharireshu,
देव पितृ मनुष्यादि शरीरेषु
sharireshu.
that asharira atma sarva kshetreshu. Now you can look at it like this. You can say that it is, when I take where the error is in my own body, and this, it is in the Sukshma Sharira, it is in the Sthula Sharira, it is also in the Karana Sharira, which is one of the reasons they're all called Sharira. Shiryamanaha. Therefore, Sharireshu, plural. One way of looking at it. But then this is universal. It is there in every Sharira. My Sharira, your Sharira, Deva Sharira, Pitru Sharira, Gandharva Sharira, Yaksha Sharira. Whatever, the moment you say there is a Sharira, it has to have an Asharira. That which enlivens the Sharira. Where I therefore make a mistake saying that Sharira is I. It is not incorrect. But the bigger mistake is, I am that Sharira. Everybody makes that mistake. So Acharya says, including Devas, including Pitras, including Manushya, everybody makes the same mistake. Till one re-examines that and has had enough punya backing to go and look for the answer. I hold that every human being, and because we have been given the thinking capacity, has these questions. How can the Sharira be I? But we can't find the answer. And we have to assign something to that I, because I am indubitably. I am. Nobody can negate that. Therefore, I have to have some form in which I call I. And since universally everybody says I is the Sharira, I also say I is the Sharira. Besides that, this Sharira has to transact in the world. Sharira has to be fed. It has to be fed for food. It has to be fed feelings, thoughts. It has to express itself in the Jagat. Even if you want to be fed, you would go and ask that fellow, give me this. So all the Jnanendriyas or Karmendriyas come into action. Prana has to operate. Therefore, the Sharira recognition I as the Sharira is universal. And even though I might question that because I'm a very sharp thinking person, I'm also a rationalist in that sense. I argue with myself, I use reasoning and logic to say that I cannot be Sharira. But I don't know what Sharira is. Therefore, I have what is called a Samanya Jnanam, that I am and the Sharira cannot be I. Or the other way around, I cannot be Sharira. But I don't have that Vishesha Jnanam of what is then this I. So I stick with what I know. When I start looking at saying, what is it that is there, which could be the I, if this is not the I, that inquiry is the sadhana. And I should have enough punya to back me to be able to go after that knowledge. So, this Deva Pritta Manushyadi Sharireshu Adi is written, everything is included. I'm also saying every jiva, whether it's a mosquito or an elephant or whatever else, also has the same this thing, but they don't have the capacity to think. But this problem is there for everybody. Anavasteshu,
Anavasteshu,
avasthiti rahiteshu,
avasthiti rahiteshu,
anityeshu,
Nityeshu
avasthitam,
avasthitam,
nityam.
nityam.
I'm breaking it down so that it's easy to read. Anavasteshu, what is the meaning? This is the way Bashyam is written. He'll take the word from there. We started with Ashariraha, Sharireshu. Each word he took and he expanded on that, told us what it is. Now he's taking Anavasteshu. What is Anavasteshu? Avasthiti rahiteshu. That which does not have a stable state. The moment you say state, it is subject to change. So when you say avastha-trayam, all are subject to change. Any avastha, subject. Here we are talking about anavasthesha. That can there be a state which is unchanging, which is not subject to time? This avasthiti rahiteshu and anityeshu, that which is not subject to time. Anityeshu. Avasthitam remains unchanging, nityam. Desha kala vastu aparichinna. That is anavastheshu. Such a atma one can recognize in every sharira. Why? Because avikritam ityetat. Avikritam.
Avikritam ityetat.
Subject to change in any way. It is without any qualities, without any attributes, covers everything, without any relationships, nothing. Therefore, not subject to change. Avikritam, not subject to change in any form. And then he's taken us of the word Mahantam.
Mahantam.
Mahantam is a word taken from the text again, from the Mula. He's taken a word like Ashariram, Sharireshu, Avasthitam, Anavasthitam, all from the first part of the first sentence, first line. Second line, there is Mahantam. This is, Mahat means big. But big can be relative. Compared to a virus, a mosquito is big. But every big, small has to be compared to something else. But compared to a mosquito, a cat is big. Compared to a cat, an elephant is big. Compared to an elephant, the earth is big. It's all relative only. So he says, Mahantam, Mahatvasya Apekshikatva. Want to read that? Mahatvasya
Mahatvasya
Apekshikatva Shankayam
Apekshikatva Shankhayam
Aha.
Aha.
This doubt will come because Mahat is relative. So what do you mean Mahat? When you say that I know that Mahan Vastu, Mahantam Janati. If I know that Mahan, Nyatva, Shokam Nasti. But how do I know Mahantam? How do I understand Mahantam? What is this Mahat is talking about? That Shankha will come. So he says, Mahatvasya apekshikatva Shankayam aha. To address that Shankha, the doubt, what is this Mahat? Mahat brings some idea into our head, but always in comparison with something else. So Mahat apekshikatva Shankayam aha Vibhum. Vibhum, Vibhuhu is another name for Mahavishnu. Vibhum means Vividam Bhati. Pervades everything. That is Vibhum. Therefore, now the Mahantam has a context. That which pervades everything, therefore, is bigger than anything you can think of. Therefore, Mahato Mahiyan. So, Mahatvasya apekshikatva Shankayamaha Vibhum. Now, the word Vibhum, he explains as Vyapinam. That which is Sarva Vyapi, that Nyatva. That Atma, which is Vyapi, Sarva Vyapi, that Atma, which is Asharihiram, that which is Avasthitam, that which is Mahan, that which is Vibhuhu. Tam Nyatva na shochati. All these taken from the thing and saying, knowing all this nature of the Atma like this, na shochati. Atmanam,
Atmanam
Atmagrahanam,
Atmagrahanam
Swataha Ananyatva Pradarshanartham.
Swataha Ananyatva Pradarshanartham.
So Atma Shabda is used here. Atmanam Nyatva is used to show Ananyatvam. See, the Dhira Purusha who's understood the Atma not as a third person, not as something outside, but Ananyatvam is understood. So, Atmanam, Atmagrahanam, Swataha Ananyatva Pradarshanartham. This is the word Atma. Atma means self. To indicate, to show Ananyatvam. The Dhira Purusha knows Ananyatvam. That Atma that I'm talking about, which is Vibhum, which is Vibhu, which is Mahan, which is Ashariram, all of that, which is all that thing we talked about earlier, which is asino duram brajati, which is anoraniyan, mahato mahiyan, all of that is I. That I recognize, and therefore I have removed the error that I have been subject to all this time. That is the Dhira Purusha, Dhiman. Dhiman is one who has buddhi. But every in this man business, you say buddhiman. Buddhiman means one who has buddhi. Dhiman also means the same thing. But everybody has buddhi. I don't think anybody here, anybody in the world who doesn't have buddhi, except perhaps an odd freak. But buddhiman means one who has the buddhi which can recognize this, ananyatvam. That dhiman, that dhira purusha, swataha ananyatva pradarshanaartham, the word atma is used. So, because he looked at mahantam, he looked at vibhum, and he also said atmanam. Recognize myself. Atmanam. What is this atma? Atma shabdaha
Atmashabdaha
pratyagatma vishaye eva mukhyaha.
Pratyagatma Vishaya Eva Mukhyaha.
Pratyagatma indicates as far as you can go. Sometimes translated as innermost. I don't think that's a very good translation, but that's the closest translation you can come up with. That which you can't go beyond. Everything else you can say +1 or the equivalent of that. Pratyagatma is that which you can't go beyond which. Therefore, one can think of it as Purnatvam. You cannot have anything after that. So that Pratyagatma is the mukhya artha of the Atma Shabda. That which is therefore the adhishthanam for everything. That Atma I recognize whose ananyatvam is as I, is the Atma that we are talking about. Atma Shabdaha Pratyagatma Vishaye Eva Mukhyaha. You can talk about what we mistake I to be, starting from my sharira, physical sharira, my thoughts, my feelings, my senses. Remember now all this I'm saying my. That which is mine I recognize as I. Sometimes goes beyond. You know, a fellow has bought a new house, built a new house, that is I. Tomorrow something happens, fire there in the house is destroyed, he is devastated. I am done for, I have nothing to live for. Or a relationship is I. What is that? They say, दो दिल एक जैसे धड़कते हैं. I am the same as you. My son is I. All that I've earned so far is I. If somebody comes and takes it all away, I am destroyed. When we were studying, Gitama lost a lot of stuff. Burglary happened. A lot of ancestral property, gold and silver, which she had kept in the house, were stolen. She went to our Acharyaji, Swami Sakshat Kathananda, and said, this is what happened. You know what he said? They're good. What? Good? Yeah. Otherwise, how will you get vairagyam? How will you get vairagyam? How will you distance yourself from the sense that all that is I? So this I, they're all what are called gauna artha. But here we talk about that I, which is the mukhya artha. Atma shabdaha pratyagatma vishaye eva mukhyaha. When you read the Bhagavad Gita again, look for all those verses which have paradoxes, contradictions. I told you 9th chapter 1. Similarly, you will find 2nd chapter, there are several of them. 4th chapter, you find karmani, akarmaya pashet. How can you say akarmani in karma? So all these paradoxes you will find in the Bhagavad Gita. Look at them and then recognize, saying, how can this be possible? In all these, what do I recognize? Ashariram sharireshu anavasthitam anavasteshu avasthitam. Which is Mahan, which is Vibhu, which is Atma. That Atma, that I, one has to recognize. So, if you recognize that, Shokam Tarati Atmavit. There's a little bit left in this Bashyam now. We'll continue in the next class because we're running out of time. And continue later. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om